The reason I focus on the question of why good people do bad environmental things is that I think a lot of people think it's really easy to solve environmental problems, that all you need to do is convince people that they're doing something wrong and they'll change their behavior. But really, most of us are behaving the ways we behave because there are good reasons to behave the way we're behaving. And so you can be a perfectly environmentally concerned, morally upright person and still act in ways that are causing environmental damage. And so if we're going to fix the problems, we need to understand why they come to be made. So the first thing I talk about when trying to understand this question of why good people are doing bad environmental things is that environmental problems are externalities. They're unpriced, unintended consequences of something else that we're trying to do. So if I'm trying to get to work and I drive my car, my intention is to get to work, but I'm contributing to global climate change in that process. I don't go out and say, gee, I'm going to change the climate. What a great idea. I say, I want to get to work today and it's really cold and I'm going to drive my car. So environmental problems happen because of other things that we're trying to do, but other environmental consequences that transpire. The second thing that comes from the fact that environmental problems are externalities is that often the behavior that you undertake happens now, happens in this location at this moment, but the effects are felt in a different place or a different time. And that can make it very hard to take those concerns into consideration because I'm driving my car here and now because I'm late to give this lecture on the Wellesley College campus, but the effects of climate change are going to be felt in the Maldives as sea level rises and people can't live there anymore, or going to be felt 100 years in the future as the carbon dioxide is still in the atmosphere that I put there. And so it can be very difficult to take those things into consideration, especially if you're trying to meet your basic needs. If you're trying to feed your family, if you're trying to earn a living, you're concerned about what's happening here and now. You're much less concerned about what's happening somewhere else at some time very distant in the future. So there are a lot of things that also contribute to this process. One of them that I talk about is the idea of the structure of the issue. So if you're trying to get people to work together to address an environmental problem, but you can't exclude people from the resource. So one of the things I study is global fisheries politics. And on the ocean, you can't keep people from accessing fisheries. So if we're trying to collectively cooperate to reduce catches so that fish can be used sustainably over the long term, but you can't keep people from accessing the resource, it's very hard for us to collectively solve that problem. And then fisheries have an additional problem that many environmental resource problems have, which is that they're subtractable, which means that my use of the resource affects the usability of the resource for you. So if I take that fish out of the ocean, it's not there anymore for somebody else to catch. It's also not there to make baby fish so we can keep catching fish over the long term. And so if you have an environmental problem where you can't exclude people from the resource, and those people that you can't exclude, when they use the resource, it diminishes the resource's usefulness for other people, that's a very difficult problem to solve. I think the most important thing to get from this perspective I'm trying to give is there are really good reasons that we're all behaving the way that we're behaving. So whether it's a policy issue or an infrastructure issue or just an individual behavior issue, we're doing what we're doing because we made a conscious choice to do something for a good reason. And if it's causing environmental problems, we need to understand what that good reason is, what we're trying to accomplish in order to figure out how to best address the problem. So it turns out that environmental problems are really hard to deal with, in part because we're all doing what we're doing for good reasons, and it's therefore not that easy to change what we're doing. I think I have two pieces of advice for Albright Fellows working on projects. One of them is that you have to simultaneously have a big picture idea and drill down deep into some very specific details. So either one of those in isolation doesn't work, but together is the way that you think about presenting. And then the second point that I would make is that whatever they're doing, whatever they're recommending, they need to be thinking about the externalities, the unintended consequences of what they're recommending. So they may have a great piece of infrastructure to solve a water problem that they're coming up with, but there are almost certainly going to be other unintended consequences of the thing that they're recommending. And so better to have thought about those before they make the recommendation, and either change their recommendation in light of them or find ways to at least mitigate the additional problems that might be caused by what they're recommending.